By the end of the 19th century, a silent war had begun. Not with cannons, not with tanks, but with oil. This invisible struggle turned into a storm in the early 20th century. Empires clashed over the black gold beneath the earth. Secret deals, oil routes, giant corporations. The fate of the world was no longer written at diplomatic tables, but at the edges of oil wells. This is the dark and true story of how oil became the first global weapon of the modern age, raising empires and bringing others to their knees. Welcome to Financial Chronicle, where we uncover the true financial stories behind power, money, and history. In the late 18th century, oil meant almost nothing to the world. It seeped naturally from the ground, used only for simple lamps or basic medicine. No one imagined this black liquid would one day reshape human civilization. In the early 19th century, science began to evolve. Refining techniques improved, chemists studied petroleum's properties, yet oil still lived in the shadow of coal. Then humanity invented the internal combustion engine. These engines were lighter, stronger, faster, and they ran on one thing: oil. By the 1850s, the first commercial oil wells were drilled since cities expanded, industry accelerated, transportation transformed. Petroleum was no longer a byproduct. It was the bloodstream of modern life. By the end of the 19th century, one truth became undeniable. Power was no longer measured by the size of an army, but by who controlled the fuel that kept the engines running. During this transformation, one man emerged in the United States: John D. Rockefeller. Rockefeller controlled the oil industry like a master chess player. Wells, refineries, pipelines, tankers, every link of the chain was under his command. Standard Oil crushed anyone who stood in its way. Competitors were bought out, undercut, or forced into partnerships. By the early 1900s, the very heartbeat of the American economy was tied to the decisions made on Rockefeller's desk. And Europe was terrified, because if oil remained in the hands of a single nation, or worse, a single man, the fate of future wars would rest entirely with him. For centuries, Britain had ruled the seas. Its navy was the spine of its global empire. But in the early 20th century, a new reality emerged. Modern warships would no longer run on coal, but on oil made ships lighter, faster, and more powerful. It promised a revolution in naval warfare. But there was a problem. Britain had almost no oil of its own, and Standard Oil controlled nearly everything they needed. So Britain looked elsewhere. Its eyes turned to Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq and its surrounding lands. Beneath these deserts lay a fortune the world had never seen. Geologists arrived disguised as archaeologists. Agents posed as merchants and missionaries. Everyone was searching for one thing: the exact locations of the oil buried under Ottoman soil. Germany pushed forward with the Baghdad Railway, a project meant not just to connect continents, but to move Middle Eastern oil directly into Europe. Britain infiltrated Ottoman companies, buying shares and influence. Deals were made in secret, concessions quietly acquired. The destiny of the Middle East was no longer decided by empires, but by the veins of petroleum beneath the ground. The Ottoman Empire did not fully grasp how valuable the oil under its territories would become. Mosul, Kirkuk, Baghdad, Basra, these cities were more than strategic strongholds. They were the pressure points of the global energy map. European powers exploited the empire's political weakness, securing long-term rights to explore and extract oil. This wasn't just an energy race. It was the beginning of the chain of events that would shape the political borders of the entire 20th century. Amid this geopolitical storm, another giant emerged: Royal Dutch Shell. Standard Oil dominated America. Britain sought control in the Middle East, but Shell challenged both with a radical strategy. Explore the most remote and dangerous regions of the world. Build a massive tanker fleet. Distribute oil independently across continents. Soon, the global oil market turned into a three-way struggle, a deadly competition between America, Britain, and Shell. In 1908, Britain reached a historic turning point. A massive oil field was discovered in southern Iran, in what is now Abadan. The Anglo-Persian Oil Company was born, the ancestor of today's BP. Within years, the British Navy relied almost entirely on this new supply. Britain was no longer at the mercy of American oil. It had secured its own lifeline. Oil became the foundation of its imperial survival in the modern age. When World War I erupted, the true power of oil became clear. Tanks ran on oil, aircraft ran on oil, battleships ran on oil. The outcome of war was no longer determined by manpower, but by access to petroleum. For the first time, military strategy was mapped not around fortresses or infantry divisions, but around supply lines and pipelines. Modern warfare was now a war of energy. Look at the world today. The borders of the Middle East, the rise of global energy corporations, the balance of power between nations. All of it is the legacy of the oil battles that began over a century ago. Names changed. Governments changed. Borders shifted. But the rule never changed. Whoever controls the oil controls the world, and those who don't simply watch.